Well, it's a good segue for me because I attended Ken Bain's summer workshop and many years ago when I first started teaching. And I think it shaped everything I've done since. And I also thought that would be a good way for me to introduce myself, since Bain is a historian and so am I. I'm kind of an outsider to this field. But actually, I'm not. I was a dancer, and I went through professional training, but I am an outsider. So I'm actually going to reverse my presentation based on our lunchtime discussion today. We had about approximately 12 schools represented in the discussion about assessment and student learning, and I would say that it was a very rich discussion because so many of those people are right in the middle of carrying forth work at their campuses. Some of them very new, many of them very new, but everyone with a very rich practice. And I would have liked my presentation to have been about their practice. But I could just want to say three things about that workshop that are for AICAD, and which was the purpose of the conference, which was figuring out how we can collaborate. One was that AICAD could serve as a nexus, a digital nexus for the collection of resources. And if we could even just get the resources that were discussed in the room today, we would have a rich archive of work on assessment at all different levels. Number two was developing a common nomenclature, a common vocabulary about learning outcomes in art and design. And this common language would enable us to do two things. One, we wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. We could borrow language, we could learn from other people's language, and then we could begin to speak in a common voice to advocate for art and design learning in an atmosphere where it is being squeezed and where we can then enter into the STEM to STEAM discussion. And number three was everyone felt that this should not be a one-shot discussion, a one-shot, and I think that's the intention of this conference and of AICAD, as discussed Friday night, that we make sure that there are measures put into place so that these conversations continue and that AICAD provides the vital connections to make that happen. So that wasn't in my presentation at all, it came out of the workshop. I just want to ask two questions of the people in the room. How many of your institutions have a director of assessment? Show of hands. I'm not seeing a whole lot. Okay, not many. And how many have a center for teaching and learning or something to that effect? Also, I would say not a lot. How many institutions are represented in the conference? Right now, is there anybody that knows that? But anyway, obviously not everyone. And so when as a faculty member, okay, I'm not the director of assessment. We do not have a director of assessment in my institute. I am a faculty member, and I experienced trying to salvage a number of accrediting kinds of problems as a faculty member, first at the department level and then working on our middle states self-study. So that brought me into contact with faculty members across the institute, and I discovered everybody wanted to talk about assessment, but they wanted to talk about assessment at the level of the studio, at the level of the classroom, at the level of what they did. And they wanted also to begin develop a more common language of critique, I said, well, you know, we need something that's going to enable us to do that. We didn't have a structure, so I got a grant, a faculty innovation grant, and we're really right at the beginning stages. So in terms of the 12 people in the room today, I'm at the very neophyte low level, so I don't know why I'm standing up here talking to you, but maybe to encourage those of you who are like me. So I put research in the center of this, and that's because, for me, I wanted to start at the faculty level so that faculty would begin to identify what they're already doing, so that they're not, somebody is not imposing assessment strategies on them. They're recognizing in a structured way, they're beginning to explore what they're doing and also to refine it. So this research, as you can see, is not just at the faculty level, it's at the institute level, and it's what we have to tackle in our accreditation process, especially the one at the bottom, as you all know. So I went to read the assessment literature outside of art and design education first, and then I read what existed on the inside. I was actually surprised at what I found on the inside. I found a lot more than I expected. And I started to compile a literature and to write a literature review. But on the outside, Pat Hutchings, I could recommend her work, and she has a website. So she just has these 5 or 6 very straightforward, common sense principles about assessment. Build assessment around the regular ongoing work of teaching and learning. Create campus spaces and occasions for constructive assessment, conversation, and action. And you could say that that could be the AICAD principle too. So back to us, the faculty wanted to develop a culture of assessment and a culture of assessment among faculty members. So, of course, we had to do learning outcomes for our accrediting agents, for NASED, for Middle States. All of us were involved in that. So we did that at the arts and sciences, in the creative disciplines. Our goal would be to think about some common assessments across those two, because we're moving in a much more interdisciplinary direction. And we have yet to develop institute-wide learning outcomes, and I talked about that today. It's both an advantage because it's growing up from the ground, it's growing from the department level up, but it's a disadvantage for the accrediting agency. So these were some of our research questions. How can full-time, and I want to underscore, part-time faculty contribute to building and sustaining this assessment culture? And how can this culture build trust among faculty and alter perceptions about the purpose of assessment? So it's not about compliance, it's about improving teaching and learning. Some other questions. How can it become part of daily teaching and learning? How do we capture it, student learning, and then how do we collect it in a way that's reportable? And what kind of institutional supports would we need to do this? So we're beginning very small. I think if we can garner more resources, we can work at multiple levels at once. We can work at the faculty level, at department and institute. But we were starting with faculty. This is a small grant. So we surveying assessment practices at the institute, external networking, which we're doing here, and internal case studies. So we have small faculty action research projects going on assessment, and we are absolutely committed to including part-time faculty in that action research. So back to Hutchings, who talks about reframing the work of assessment as scholarship. By the way, I've lost my track of time, so is anyone? 2 more minutes. So reframe the work of assessment as scholarship. We thought that was important. It means when faculty are reviewed, this counts. This counts in the peer review process and promotion process. Then I looked at the literature inside the field of art and design education. I recommend both of these, but the one on the right just came out, and again, it's not just about art, it's across the disciplines, but it's a great combination of theory and practice. England, I don't know if our person from London is still here, but of course they have the resources to devote to do a lot of research on this because it's public monies. Another straightforward, practical advice from Pat Hutchings involves students in assessment. So that's where we started. And these are just two of our research projects in drawing and printmaking, rubric reference student self-assessment. And this is the foundation drawing teacher, and he does this every single day and gives students PDFs, and there's multiple visual learning going on here. But his questions, and these are quotes: how do students use the self-assessment rubric that he developed? How does the rubric help students engage in self-reflection? And how does it change their participation in conversation and interaction with others, especially during critique? Those were his questions. That's what he's studying. And in printmaking, this professor identified a problem. Students were not going beyond assignment directions. She wants to know how the rubric could help elevate students' understanding of what a more advanced level is and strive for that. And capture the language that students use when they talk about those upper levels of work. So this was our way of building our culture of assessment from the ground up, the research, action research, networking meetings, and as people have talked about today, an LMS shared site for discussion. And this is what I had originally proposed, not knowing anything. I was asked to come up with an idea for an assessment consortium at AICAD. I would like to see Assessment Fellows Network so that we have faculty who are recognized as scholars and who are doing research. The online, some of this has already been talked about in our lunchroom discussion, and external funding to support it. And faculty advocacy for specific pedagogies and assessments in art and design. I think that's really important. And that's probably what we talked about today with the common language. So I think I did it in 10 minutes. Thank you.